All right, looks like everyone is joining. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webinar. Tonight, we will hear from Elissa Taub, immigration lawyer and partner at Siskind Susser. We will review the current government processing times for a variety of applications, government policies regarding expediting certain types of pending matters, and potential strategies to ask the government to speed up its work. In addition to USCIS, we will cover processing at the Department of State and Department of Labor, and I look forward to introducing our speaker here in just a few moments. Please note that tonight's presentation will be recorded. While everyone's still logging on, I want to go ahead and take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Ashley Pichard, and I'm the Program Relations Specialist here at PracticeMatch. Before joining PracticeMatch, I was an in-house physician recruiter, and in that role, I developed a true passion for helping physicians in their journey from training to employment. With PracticeMatch, I get to take that passion to the next level by working with residency and fellowship programs nationwide to offer career guidance and mentorship for their physicians, from medical students applying to residency all the way through helping them find their dream job. Hopefully, since you're here tonight, you already know about PracticeMatch and all that we offer to physicians. If not, I want to highlight just a few of the resources that my team and I have available to make sure that you get the most out of your PracticeMatch experience. We have a free CV builder and expert CV review. So if you're not sure about that CV, you can send it to me and we'll get you a free review and make sure you're ready to apply for jobs. We have scholarships. We have a job board where you can see postings and filter them by specialty, geographic location, visa status, and more. You can also create a profile and fill in your preferences. So then we can notify you about jobs that come open that match what you're looking for. We also have virtual career fairs. They're a great way to connect you with employers hiring in your specialty. You can also earn some additional revenue during training for attending the career fairs, and even more additional revenue by becoming a physician promoter and encouraging your colleagues to attend. We have monthly webinars on various topics regarding training, interview preparation, contract negotiation, immigration assistance, loan repayment, and more. Also, if you think your program would benefit from a personalized training on any topic that I have mentioned, we can do that too. Just reach out to me. We have a free physician immigration handbook provided by Siskind Susser. Very happy to have one of the authors of that book with us tonight. We're going to hear more from her in a minute. We also have a physician practice path career guidebook. In addition to that, we have a network of experts in just about every physician-facing industry. So if you ever have a question related to career guidance, you can reach out to PracticeMatch and we'll be happy to provide you with mentorship and guidance. If you have questions about any of the things I mentioned above, please feel free to reach out to me. I will be sure to send my contact information to you tomorrow. Now, let's learn more about physician immigration. Please note the microphones will be muted throughout the presentation. If you have a question, please use the chat feature so Elissa can get that answered for you. A little bit about Elissa. Elissa Taub is a partner at the immigration law firm Siskind Susser, where she leads the firm's healthcare immigration practice. She handles numerous matters for physicians, including J-1 waivers, H-1Bs, green card applications, and more. Elissa is also the co-author of the Physician Immigration Handbook. She's an active member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association and has served on several national committees. She's also a leader within the American Health Law Association. Elissa earned her law degree from Villanova University School of Law and her bachelor's degree from Washington University in St. Louis. It's my pleasure to introduce Elissa Taub.
Thanks so much, Ashley, and it's great to be here with you all. And thank you for joining us on this Tuesday night. So tonight we are going to talk a little bit about government processing times. And this is a hot topic any day of the week. And so instead of kind of going through and talking about the types of cases and the types of processes that you might go through in your immigration journey, our assumption tonight is going to be that perhaps something's been filed on your behalf and maybe it's taking a little bit longer than you expected, or you're wondering, like, how do I find out how long this is going to take and what should my expectation should be? And what do I do if something's going on too long? So we're going to talk about all of this tonight. I'm going to focus on three government agencies. Our primary focus to get started is going to be USCIS, of course, as the bulk of our processes go through that agency, but I'm also going to touch a little bit on the US Department of Labor and on the Department of State. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn off my camera while we're giving the webinar, so you guys we can all focus on the slides and not on me. So there we go. And so let's take it away. So when it comes to USCIS processing times, there's literally one word, unpredictable. I could pretty much just finish the presentation now, and there you go. We are in a period of time where even the director of USCIS last week in a presentation admitted that the government's processing times on most form types are too long. And the challenge is that while in a lot of cases we're seeing very long processing times, every now and again we get a case that's adjudicated very quickly. And so there's this wide variability in how long different case types are taking, but overwhelmingly they're too long and unpredictable. So if you talk with your immigration lawyer or you sit in on a presentation like this one and somebody tells you, look, I just can't tell you how long it's going to take, I just don't have that information anymore, it's true. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on and how to kind of assess the processing times. How do you find out from USCIS what your reasonable expectations should be? So USCIS posts its processing times in two different places. And this kind of creates a lot of confusion. As you'll see, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive so you can kind of get an idea of what this looks like. The first place, the first link that I've listed there is the USCIS historical processing times chart. It goes back about 5 or 6 fiscal years and shows you the median processing time for almost every single form type. Now, the challenge here is that not every form type is broken out into excruciating detail to tell you like specifically the type of cases that they were, but it gives you kind of a bird's eye view for all I-485s or all EADs based on 485s or all 539s, whatever it is, what the processing times were in that fiscal year. And then you can compare, a prior fiscal year to what's going on now. So we're going to talk about that on the next slide. And then we also have the USCIS current processing times page, which is that second link there that tells you over the last 6 months, what is the range of processing times? What is the average and what are the longest pending cases? And it also tells us when will USCIS accept an inquiry, a service request, a complaint about your case taking too long. So these two charts are really important if you want to gain any insight into the processing times. But I will warn you, as you'll see on these next couple of pages, it doesn't necessarily answer your questions. So let's talk about historic processing times. And I'm going to use EADs, employment authorization documents, also called work cards. We're going to use this as sort of an example. We're not going to go through every form type. We're not going to go through every process, every service center. We would be here till tomorrow if we did that, but I'm going to use this as a sample so you can kind of get an idea of what these charts look like and the information that you can kind of glean from them. So this chart comes from the historic processing times page, and that's that first link that I had on the last slide. And if you go down to that highlighted line, we're talking about EADs based on a pending I-485 adjustment of status application. And the highlighted number there is year to date for this fiscal year. So starting October 1st, 2021 through now, the median, not average, not mean, but the median processing time for all adjustment-based EADs is 7.2 months. You all learned in math class what the median is, and I'm a lawyer, not a mathematician, but I know that that's the midpoint, right? Not the average. So that means that there are equal number of people processed in greater time than that and in lesser time than that, and that's the exact middle, is over 7 months for an EAD. If you look back historically, right, each one of those columns with numbers is a fiscal year. It wasn't that long ago that we were talking about 3 to 4 months, maybe 5 months to get an EAD, midpoint. And now we're talking about over 7. So, you can kind of look here, right? Historically, you can see the processing times have lengthened. I would not recommend anybody think when they file their adjustment of status application that their EAD is going to come in less than 7 months. And in a lot of cases, as you'll see on the next slide, it's taking a lot longer than that. And this is important because if you're filing your adjustment of status application and the idea is that you're going to get an EAD quickly and be able to work or change jobs, the fact that these processing times are so long means that you may need to recalibrate those expectations or those plans because the government is taking so long on these cases. The other part of this chart that I want to highlight is the top line there where it says all other applications for employment authorization. And this is what I was referring to previously, that USCIS doesn't break this down by every single case type. This all other applications includes H4 EADs, L2 EADs, J2 EADs, right? All of these spouse statuses, OPT, right? Any other I-765 that is not listed here. So basically anything other than TPS, DACA, asylum, and adjustment EADs. So there you see the median is 6.7 months, but that information is almost useless because there's such a wide range of EAD applications that are covered there that you really can't take any information away from that. And you'll see on the next slide what I'm talking about. So these are our historic processing times. But I think it can be helpful, like I said, to go back and see, are cases these days taking longer than they were several years ago? And quite clearly, the answer is yes. So I would say, pre-COVID, if we were filing an adjustment for somebody and they asked me, how long till I get my EAD? I'm going to tell them 4 to 6 months, which was pretty much right. Now I'm kind of telling them all bets are off. I don't know when your EAD is going to come. So let's go to the next page. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, and I'll just say right here, I'm happy to monitor the chat if there are questions, or the Q&A if there are questions, but I cannot answer any case-specific questions. I will not be giving any personal legal advice in this forum. I cannot tell you what specific actions you should take in your case. If you have an immigration attorney who's working on your case, they're the more appropriate person to pose those questions to. And at the end of this webinar, I will share my contact information. So if you do want to schedule an appointment with me, or send me an email with some questions that are more personal to you, I'd be happy to answer them privately offline after the webinar. Okay. So let's talk about current processing times. So I pulled this chart from the USCIS website on Sunday, and I specifically went to the processing times for the Texas Service Center, and I asked for I-765, which is the EAD application. And as I mentioned, I'm using EADs basically as an example for everything else. There are other service centers that handle EAD applications besides Texas, but this is what I picked to kind of show you the difference between historic processing times and current processing times. So if you look at the last line that is highlighted for those cases based on a pending I-485 adjustment application in category C9, the Texas Service Center tells you that they're basically adjudicating cases within a year, between 11 and a half and 13 and a half months, and that they won't entertain an inquiry or a service request or a complaint for cases that were filed after December 23rd, 2020. In other words, your case has to be pending longer than 13 and a half months to file an inquiry because, based on a case pending too long. So that doesn't really jive with the 7.2 month median processing time we saw on the prior page, right? That may be that there are enough cases on either end of that, maybe at other service centers. Maybe, when you talk about Nebraska or you talk about the National Benefits Center or, other places where adjustment of status applications are filed, that some other service center may be adjudicating cases more quickly than Texas. But right now, if I'm filing an adjustment of status application in Texas, I'm not going to have any expectation that an EAD is going to come in less than 11 and a half months. Maybe somewhere between 7.5 months and a year, right? I mean, that could be a reasonable expectation. But I would be loath to believe that it was going to come in less time than that. You could be hopeful, but again, we're talking about what's reasonable to assume. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm, making apologies for USCIS or defending them. I'm just telling you what the charts say. I think this is all ridiculous, right? These processing times are ridiculously long, but this is what is going on right now in terms of government processing. The other two highlighted lines there are for H4 EADs. And in Texas, they separate them out by those that are filed together with an H4 application. So where you have the EAD application and the H4 application filed at the same time. And then that middle line there are H4 EAD applications where the EAD is filed by itself. Maybe the person's already in H4 status and now they've become eligible, so they file the EAD. You can see that the processing times are virtually identical between the two. And that the receipt date for a case inquiry is virtually identical, only a little bit of time in between those, which I find interesting, right? Like I would think the standalone ones, maybe they would be faster because the person's already in H4 status. So maybe the officer wouldn't have as much to do, waiting on the H4 application to be adjudicated first, but it looks like that's not really the case. They're still taking a long, long time. And of course, when the H4 EAD first became a thing, they were taking maybe 4 to 6 months total. So definitely a lengthening of those processing times over the last few years. So one of the takeaways here, though, is, when you look at those median processing times historically, and you look here, you kind of find it hard to know, like, what should I believe? And I think if you ready yourself to understand and expect that your case is going to take longer than you want it to, that's probably right now the right mindset to have, given the ridiculousness of these processing times. So what do we do, right? How do we keep a case from being, from pending this long? What do we do if a case really is, if it's prejudicial to you, right, that this case is pending too long, you need that EAD to continue working. What happens, maybe outside the EAD context, right? There may be other types of cases that you have filed, naturalization cases, marriage-based green card cases, J1 waiver, whatever it is, you may be waiting for USCIS to act on a case and it's just kind of languishing and you're trying to figure out what to do. So I have here like a hierarchy of ways to speed up your case. So of course, at the top is premium processing. Premium processing is a USCIS service that for a fee of $2,500, the government will work on your case within 15 days of when it's filed. That 15 days includes weekends and holidays. The challenge with premium processing is that it's not available for every type of case. Notably, it is not available for EAD applications and it is not available for H4s. And it's also not available for certain types of I-140s. So like national interest waiver applications, you can't premium process. A couple of years ago, Congress passed a law that would allow USCIS to provide premium processing for EAD applications, H4 applications, and national interest waivers. USCIS has yet to take advantage of that expansion. They say that they're trying to get a regulation published to make that happen. They were hoping to do that by the end of 2021. They didn't, and now we don't know when that's going to happen. So stay tuned. Maybe there will be premium processing expanded someday, but not yet. So the second option on this list is a service request. And I kind of alluded to this on the prior page. This is that whole like receipt date to submit an inquiry thing. You can go to USCIS's website and there's a tool on their website to submit a case inquiry. And if your case is outside of the posted processing times, you can report it. You don't have to call, you can do it right there on the website. Another way to kind of do that would be, if you didn't want to call, is to use Emma, which is USCIS's bot on their website, which sometimes can be really helpful and sometimes faster than calling also. The service request, of course, will only be submitted if your case is pending longer than what that date was on the processing times chart. So if it says that you can't submit a case inquiry unless your case was filed on or before December 23rd, 2020, the system will not take an inquiry from you if you try to submit it. It'll tell you your case hasn't been pending long enough. So in that regard, the service request isn't really helpful because you're at the mercy of whatever USCIS says it wants its processing times to be. On the other hand, if you do have a case pending that long and you are able to successfully submit an inquiry, what will oftentimes happen is USCIS will send back some bland response that says your case is pending. or it's with an officer for review, or they'll say, we're sorry, it's pending too long, we'll get to it. But miraculously, like sometimes not too long after that, you'll get some kind of action on your case. So even though they might not promise that in the response, I find that they can be effective if you have the ability to actually submit. I'm going to talk more in depth about expedite requests on the next slide, but you do have the ability in some cases to ask USCIS to expedite your case. If premium processing is available, you cannot ask for it to be expedited. You have to pay for the premium processing, and that will guarantee your 15-day turnaround. It's important to know that expedite requests are 100% discretionary. USCIS gets to make that decision. And you have to make the request in accordance with its guidelines, which we'll talk about on the next slide. But, so you have to, really think long and hard about whether it's the right option for you. After that, I would talk about congressional assistance. Sometimes you can contact your congressional representative in the House of Representatives or your senator to make an inquiry with USCIS on your behalf. And I think, if you've taken some of these routes, if you've tried to do a service request, but it wouldn't take it, if USCIS denies an expedite request or nobody's giving you the time of day, going to your congressperson, going to your senator can be an effective way of getting attention to your case, especially if your case is sympathetic and the congressional office is sympathetic to you and really wants to go to bat for you and help you out. It can be a really, really effective pathway. I want to caution you, they're not miracle workers, and USCIS will sometimes rebuff even the congressional offices. So, it's one of these things. I encourage you to use your best judgment about, when to be the squeaky wheel and try to get attention to your case. Because there have been times where so many people were going to the congressional office for help that USCIS basically just turned off the spigot, right? They were like, no, we don't want to hear about it. So even deserving cases were getting, the brush off because there were just too many inquiries coming in. So be judicious, be reasonable, be objective about your case. But congressional assistance can be very effective. And then the last option that I listed is a mandamus lawsuit. If your case is really pending too long, you've tried what you can to get USCIS to pay attention to you, and you're at your wit's end and nobody's listening, suing the government could be a good option. We've seen it on EAD delays. I've seen it on green card delays. We've seen it on a number of different types of cases where on naturalization applications, where cases are just languishing and nobody seems to want to help. Suing the government can be effective. And what these mandamus lawsuits are, it's not going to necessarily force the government to approve your case. What it does is it forces them to do their job and take action. So you could get a request for evidence, right, after you file a mandamus lawsuit. It's not something that guarantees success. It just guarantees action. But on a case that's long pending where nobody's been paying attention, just getting some kind of action out of the government is a victory in certain situations. So that's certainly something to talk with an experienced attorney about, to find out if your case is, something that's appropriate for a mandamus action, to find out how long it will take, what it will cost, all those kinds of things. But don't be nervous. Suing the government can be a really useful tool, and typically does not result in any kind of retaliation or persecution or anything like that. If nothing else, it shows the government that you're serious about following up on your case, and won't hesitate to take stern action. So let's just talk quickly about expedite requests. On this slide, I listed the requirements or the criteria that you would need to meet to make an expedite request. When you call, you have to, I recommend calling USCIS or asking your attorney to call, and not to do this through Emma, although sometimes that can be helpful. But there's no online form to fill out or anything. It has to be a phone call. And the officer on the phone is going to ask you what category, what criterion do you fit into for the expedite request. And at the bottom of this slide, there's a link there to the USCIS page about how to make an expedite request. And I also mentioned that in the policy manual that's also available at the USCIS website, Chapter 5 is all about request to expedite. Just in the last couple of weeks, USCIS put some meat on the bones of these criteria. They used to just list them out exactly like this. But in the last couple of weeks, they've actually given examples of the types of cases that can qualify. A couple of times on that page, it says something about healthcare workers. And I will caution you, in December, I was going to say last month, but it's February now. So in December, USCIS did issue an updated policy on expedites for healthcare workers that says if you have an EAD renewal application pending and your work authorization based on your existing EAD is going to expire within 30 days, they will grant an expedite. They'll probably ask you for additional evidence to prove that you're a healthcare worker and what the consequences are of you not being able to continue working, that is a basis to get an expedite. When I recently called USCIS, they were loath to expand that to all healthcare workers, even though in the recent policy manual update, it makes it sound that like all healthcare workers would be eligible for expedites just by virtue of being a healthcare worker. That's not necessarily how the policy is being applied. You need to be prepared to explain to the government why your case should be expedited. I will caution, if you are in H-1B or O status or something that's not about to expire, you're not losing that job, and you want an EAD to moonlight, or you want travel authorization just to make it easier so you don't have to go to the embassy, your expedite request is going to be denied. You have to really think long and hard about why would the government expedite your case. You have to show some kind of negative consequence. That first bullet point, they even say severe financial loss to a person is not just mere loss of a job, like literally says something, mere loss of a job. You have to really be prepared to come at them with something very compelling. Humanitarian reasons for travel, emergencies, that's like traveling for medical assistance, right? Medical treatment abroad, or a need, maybe there's a family member who's really sick. You have to be able to prove that, and they may grant a emergency travel authorization. But I caution you and advise that you really take these criteria seriously. USCIS denies the bulk of the expedite requests that are submitted, and they deny them with barely a second glance. We sometimes get denials the same day they're submitted with no basic information in them. It just says, all cases are important. We're really sorry, but your case isn't that important. We're denying your expedite. I mean, so, unless you have to really be able to get the officer's attention with some really egregious situation. I recently had cases where I had intensivists who were about to go out, not be able to work for however long because their EADs hadn't been issued. And USCIS paid attention to that because it was right at the height of the Omicron surge, and who wants an ICU to be without two doctors? And we were able to work those through. So, really think about, what would be the consequences of your case not being approved before you ask for an expedite, and talk with your lawyer, right? It may be that your case really is deserving of an expedite. We file these requests, we call and make these requests all the time. So I don't want to make it sound like nobody qualifies, but it's important to really be objective when you're thinking about your own case, which I know is hard to do. Okay, so let's leave this for the moment, and let's leave USCIS. I want to go back. Let's leave USCIS alone for the moment. That's enough bashing them for one night, although we could go on and on. But I just, I really wanted to set the stage and give you a flavor for, cases can pen for a long time. And just because you haven't heard anything doesn't mean there's a problem. It doesn't mean that somebody lost your case. It doesn't mean that it's about to be denied. You may have 10 friends whose cases were all approved, all filed the same time, all the same as yours. Every case is different. And, this is why I always tell folks, like, don't listen to your friends. They don't always help because, their case might be with an officer who's really efficient and yours might not be. And that may be the whole reason for it. Maybe yours is sitting on somebody's kitchen table at home and, their kid woke up from a nap and they had to go deal with that and didn't get to your case that day. I mean, real world practical issues. So, and we'll never know, right? Because we have no way of knowing exactly what's happening. So, keep an eye on your case, educate yourself on what the processing times are, so you know what your expectation should be. And if based on that, start looking around and saying, hey, I think my case is taking too long, talk to your lawyer and see what your options are in your case for what to do next. Okay, so let's talk about the Department of Labor. And this should be a little bit faster of a discussion, right? The Department of Labor has a first in, first out policy on its cases. So when we're talking about the Department of Labor, I'm talking about prevailing wage requests that we file as part of green card applications, perm labor certifications, and the actual perm labor certifications themselves. And these are like basically the first step toward a green card when your employer is sponsoring you. So the Department of Labor has a first in, first out policy. They really don't deviate from that. But I will give you one caveat. Most of their analysts work remotely, and they work at different speeds because they're people, right? These are not cases that are adjudicated by computer. They are adjudicated by individuals. So you may have one officer who is handling cases that were filed during 1 week, and another officer who's maybe handling cases that were filed during a different week, and one is ahead of the other. So your application was filed on August 4th, and your friend's application was filed on August 8th, and theirs gets approved before yours. And you're like, how is that first in, first out? Well, they're working on August, right? And your cases may be with different officers. So you may get it's not entirely linear. It's like a sort of almost linear in terms of how they adjudicate. So just keep that in mind. You can find these processing times that I've copied and pasted here at the website that's listed on the slide. So you'll see right now prevailing wages and perms, the prevailing wage that is needed to file the labor certification, and the labor certification itself are taking the exact same amount of time. So everything that was filed in August is up for adjudication at this point. I just started receiving approvals of cases that we filed in early August on both prevailing wages and perms. So, they're taking a while. I tell people generally 6 months on prevailing wages and about 6 months on the labor certification after we file it. So overall, between the time it takes to prepare a labor certification and the time it takes to get it approved, you're talking about a year for that preliminary process to be approved before you can go and file, before your employer can file an I-140 on your behalf and formally sponsor you for the green card. So it's a long time. One thing to know about the Department of Labor is that there is no premium processing and there is no expedite procedure. All of those things we talked about on this last slide about service inquiries and expedite requests and congressional assistance and all that, it does not apply to the Department of Labor. That was all very specific to USCIS, and some of it may apply with the Department of State, which we'll talk about last. But the Department of Labor is like, they have their policy, they stick to it. It has been the policy for as long as I can remember. This is not new. But there's nothing anybody can really do. If you're sitting there, nervous because your labor certification was filed and you haven't heard anything since, it's because it's pending. And when it's approved, your lawyer and your employer will get an email letting them know it was approved. And then the next step can go from there. So unlike USCIS, it's also there is a portal where your case is filed with the Department of Labor, but that belongs to your employer. So there's no case number we can give you to kind of check regularly the way you can with USCIS. Your employer can log in and see, but all it's going to tell you is if your case was submitted or it's under analyst review or it's been approved, right? You're not really going to see a full window on what's going on in your case that day. So just keep that in mind. And then finally, I'll touch quickly on the Department of State. And, for doctors, the Department of State really has a role. What is going on? Really has a role in 3 major processes: J-1 waivers, green card processing that takes place outside the United States, and visa appointments for like H's and O's and things like that. On J-1 waivers, last year at this time, the Department of State's processing came to a virtual halt. And for like 4 months, it was so excruciating. If you talk with colleagues that had their J1 waivers go through last year, they may tell you it felt like it took forever. They were basically just, it just stopped. What we've learned since then is that the Department of State's waiver review division is analog. Like literally people putting printed files and moving them from desk to desk. So, if somebody's out, if somebody's sick, if there's a problem in a processing center, case processing times are going to slow. They also are understaffed. And so that, if they lose a few people, if there's a COVID outbreak or something like that, their processing times are going to slow. The good news is that right now and from the beginning of this fiscal year through now, their processing times have really been wonderful. They've been exactly what we expect them to be. So they're not super fast, but they're where we expect them to be. And they typically slow in the spring as more and more states make their waiver recommendations and are required to then transmit those waiver recommendations to the Department of State as the second step in a J1 waiver case. They may get 90 recommendations one day if 3 states sent all 30 of their recommendations through on the same day, right? And so then you see the processing time slow. And I expect that they usually slow through like February, March, April, May, and then they pick back up again. Right now, though, in fact, we got a Department of State recommendation on a case today. Yay. But right now we see that they're in pretty good shape. If a case is pending too long at the Department of State, there is an email address that your lawyer can email to place an inquiry and just say, hey, this case has been pending longer than your posted processing times. Can you give us an update? It can take a little while to get a response from that email address, but they always respond. And oftentimes they will tell you exactly what's going on. So that's a good thing to know about. By and large, though, this year we haven't really needed to use it very much, thankfully, because it's taking a while to hear back. The second group of cases that I listed there are immigrant visa consular processing. And these are green cards being adjudicated outside the United States. So folks that are applying at a U.S. embassy or consulate for a green card. Probably see this more with nurses than we do with doctors, but this also involves people who might be sponsoring family members who are abroad, who need to go through the green card process from outside the United States. All I can say is that it's slow and we don't know when it's going to pick back up or get back to normal. It's probably going to be a few years. And the reason for that is that from April 2020 until February 2021, the government had suspended the issuance of green cards outside the United States, except in very limited circumstances. For that reason, the government is significantly backlogged in handling those applications. And although they have said that they have all kinds of policies and procedures for how they are going to issue them, and we are seeing more green cards being issued outside the United States these days than we had, they are still woefully behind. Now, the Department of State has said that that nurses and doctors are particularly eligible for expediting those applications. And we are seeing that happen in many places around the world. I would say for nurses, Manila is a tough one because so many nurses come through there that they can't possibly expedite every single case, because that would be almost every case that they have. But it's nice to know that they do recognize that nurses and doctors who are waiting outside the United States, do need more urgent preparation of their applications. And we are seeing them try to hold true to that promise. On non-immigrant visa appointments, like your H-1Bs and your O's and things like that, visa appointments can still be really hard to come by. I was really hoping that by now this would not be an issue. I would hope that most U.S. embassies and consulates were fully reopened and back to a normal schedule. Many of them are, but a lot of them aren't. And it can take a really long time to get a visa appointment. In addition, and in a lot of places like in India, where the Dropbox is a possibility and where the government has said they're going to, worldwide waive the visa appointments for certain classes of people, certain groups of people. So if you're in H-1B status, or if you're even getting a new H-1B and you meet certain requirements, you may not need to go for an interview. But even the Dropbox appointments, right? You still need an appointment to drop your application packet at the Dropbox. Even those appointments can be challenging to get. Typically, what my advice is if you go into the system and you're scheduling an appointment, even if it's not right when you need it, take the first available. Once you schedule your appointment, there will be an option to ask for an expedited or emergency appointment. And assuming that you can prove, urgent travel, or, provide information about the fact that you're a physician and you urgently need to return to the United States, typically we're seeing folks able to get those appointments expedited. The other question I'm usually asked about visa appointments is, okay, I'm not really planning on going back to India, or I'm not really planning to travel all the way back to Pakistan. I'm concerned about how long it's going to take me to get an appointment. Is there some other country I can go to do my visa stamping? Can I go to Canada? Can I go to Mexico? Where can I go? And the answer is maybe, but it's complicated because there is no authorized or specific, like, regular post that is available for third country national processing. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the availability of third country national processing has been kind of like a game. If you've ever been to an arcade and you've ever played whack-a-mole, where the thing, it like pops up and you have to whack it back down, and then another one pops up and you have to whack it back down. That's what third country national processing is like. A post will become available. A bunch of people find out about it. Everybody schedules their appointments, and then they shut it down because they need to service the people who live in that country first. So then you look for the next place. So it can take a lot of time and a lot of effort to kind of scour the globe and figure out where appointments are available. So like on this webinar tonight, if you were to say, well, can I go to Canada? I'd be like, I have no idea. Can you try to get an appointment? If you can get an appointment there and they'll schedule it for you, then yeah, maybe you can get your visa appointment in Canada. But it's not like it was pre-pandemic, when Vancouver was sort of the authorized third country national post and anybody could kind of go there as long as you can get an appointment. Things are different now. So I would not, if a friend went to Mexico a year and a half ago and had a great experience, that doesn't mean that the same post is going to be available for you to schedule an appointment at now. It literally is changing day by day by day, whether any posts are available for third country national processing. The best bet is to plan to go to your home country. And only plan to go to a third country if you really, really need to. And then then it's going to take some coordination to see the best way to do that. Some of my colleagues fashion themselves as very highly qualified travel agents because they've been sending their clients all over the world to different posts to try to get visas. And sometimes, some countries have quarantine requirements. So it may require you to go and sit somewhere for 2 weeks while you wait, while you go and you have your appointment, before the appointment, so that you can comply with the quarantine requirements. So it's really important to understand that travel around the globe is still not 100% back to any sense of normalcy in a lot of places. And with that, I'm going to stop. And I will go to the last slide, which you've seen before. And all of my contact information is there. I will tell you, if you're interested in having a consultation with myself or any of the other attorneys in our office, I actually realized that that should be visa law in the website address, the same way it is in my email address. A little typo there. But you can go onto our website and you can schedule an appointment with any of the attorneys in our firm. And then you also have my email address there. I typically do phone calls by appointment. So if you call and ask to speak to me, the likelihood is you'll get connected with somebody to schedule a consultation. If anybody has questions about the topic of this webinar, you are welcome to put them in the Q&A. I think for the couple of questions that are there, those would be questions better answered offline. because they're not really relevant to the topic that we're talking about this evening. And but I'm going to stop there.
I have just one for you, if you don't mind, and that is because, you know, I come from the recruiter side of things, and I was a recruiter in a place where we did sponsor, we sponsored visas when that was needed, and we had a candidate. It was not an issue at all. We were in the Delta region, but I would get a little bit of a heart attack sometimes when a physician would come and apply for a job when they're graduating in August and they're just reaching out to us in February because as employers, there are things that we had to do. We had to advertise jobs a certain way. There were things that we had to prove if we were going to hire a candidate that needed sponsorship. And just listening to what you're saying, you know, the processing time takes so long. So how soon would you tell a candidate that is going to be looking for sponsorship when the time comes? When do they need to be making sure their employment contract is signed?
Yeah, I think especially for J1 doctors, the best case scenario is having a contract signed by the summer of your last year of training, some point during that summer. And of course, it depends on where you're applying and all of that. But the summer of your last year of training is a good rule of thumb. But to your point, I would also mention that I usually tell doctors I have 2 waiver seasons. I have the fall waiver season, which really starts in August, that runs all the way through December. There are a lot of programs that have deadlines and everything during that fall season. And then I have a spring waiver season that starts right around now, where either physicians who didn't get their first choice of waiver because the state filled up, or physicians who just didn't sign a contract till now for any number of reasons are now coming through. And we have like another surge of waivers that we file in, you know, February, March timeframe. So, you know, obviously the preference to ensure an on-time start date and make sure everything, you know, you're not so stressed toward the end of your residency or fellowship. I usually advise trying to have your waiver filed by the end of January, depending on the circumstances, which means having a contract signed, you know, 6 weeks before that. But we're filing waivers now, and those physicians are going to, you know, most case, they're going to get that waiver and they're going to start, you know, their jobs when they need to, you know, sometime August, September, whenever that is. You know, it's important to know about board exam extensions and, you know, all of those kinds of things if you're going to be around this time of year. But it's not, you know, I know some doctors, they'll talk to me around this time of year and they're going to be like, I know all hope is lost. You know, I'm now just doing my waiver. I'm like, it's okay. You're not the only one. I promise. I promise.
Well, very good advice and very informative. Thank you so much for your time tonight. And it looks like someone asked for your email address here, so I'm typing that in for them.
Oh, great.
All right. Well, I appreciate it so much. I enjoy you every time. It's so informative. So thank you. And thank all of you guys for attending tonight as well. If you have more questions that we weren't able to get to tonight, as Elissa said, please email her. And I'll send you a follow-up email tomorrow with her contact information as well. If you enjoyed this webinar, we have another one next Tuesday night to discuss student loan repayment and forgiveness. And that is going to be after the South Virtual Career Fair. So I'll send you an invitation to that in the email tomorrow morning as well. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. And Elissa, I don't know if I can end this webinar because I have you as the host.
I can do it, and have a good night.
Perfect.
Bye.